So, hey, I'm Aaron Brown, and one of the pastors here, and we are wrapping up this series where we are looking at how do we stay in love, because all falling in love requires is a pulse. Staying in love requires a plan, and we're drawing from some resources from Andy Stanley and North Point Church, and what we're talking about applies to really everybody. I mean, whether you're a newlywed or, I don't know if this is the right phrase or not, oldie-wed, my wife and I are going on 30 years here coming up this year, but it doesn't matter if you're single, if you plan on staying single, if you want to be married or in a relationship, if you're straight or gay, all this stuff applies to you. Because it's about how do we fall in love, how do we stay in love, and how do we seek God's guidance on that. I also want to hit at the very beginning here a mystery, a little bit of a mystery, maybe not the biggest mystery in the world, but definitely one that is in our lives, a lot of our lives. And the mystery is this: how is it that two people can stand at an altar and swear their love to one another, to say to that one other person, I am your one and only, you are the only one for me, forever and always, till death do us part, we are one and always will be. I love you with all of who I am. And to say that and to say it publicly, and then 5 or 10 or however many years later, those two people hate each other. And sometimes, you know what I'm talking about, they hate each other more than they hate any other person on the planet. They've gone from this deep devotion to deep despising of that one same person. Isn't that a weird sort of mystery that happens more and more often than we care to really acknowledge? We're going to try and figure that mystery out today. I think I've got an answer as to why that can happen. But the big question that has been a part of this whole series from start to finish is this: is it possible for two people to fall in love and stay in love forever? And here's what I've realized in talking about this is, even if I told you no, it is not possible for two people to fall in love and stay in love together, even if I told you that over and over again, you would not believe me. Because there's something in you that, and maybe that part of you is gone because of some difficult things you've gone through, some tragedies that have gone through your life, or something someone's done to you. Maybe that part is gone, but there was a point, and is a point in everyone's life where no matter what anybody tells you, you do believe it's possible to fall in love and stay in love forever. And I think that part of us that believes that it's possible, even though we look around and see bad relationships and have experienced bad relationships, that part of us that believes it's possible to fall in love and stay in love forever, I think is connected to the image of God within us. Every human being is made in the image of God. And I think it's that possibility thinking that's there within us. And part of staying in love, what we've learned throughout this series, is that part of staying in love is making love anybody remember? Verb, yes, good job. Making love a verb, that it is an action. You take the noun you fell into and you make it a verb that you live out with your actions, right? And then we also learned that to stay in love, we got to learn to love like Jesus loved. And we focused on that passage in Philippians last week, where we talked about how to stay in love means that we don't treat that person that we want to be in love with forever as a competitor. We're not in competition with them. We're not always correcting them. It was blue, not red. There were 4 of us, not 5 of us. Several of you have said that's the hardest part you've talked about so far in this series. We also talked about, and we love like Jesus, we put the interests of the other person ahead of our own interests. We put their interests ahead of our own, and we treat that person that we want to fall in love with and stay in love with, we treat that person as if they are the most important person. We defer to them in every way possible. So having said all that, I realize that you may be thinking, Aaron, it's just not that simple. It really is just not that simple. And I want to acknowledge it's not. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, but first of all, I would say it would be that simple. I'm going to put you first, and you're going to put me first, and we're just going to love each other and be compassionate toward each other and excited about each other, and we're going to be like 16-year-olds holding hands the rest of our lives. It would be that simple if we came into the relationship with a heart that was very, very full of love and a heart that was very, very healthy. I think it would be that simple. If both people came into the relationship and there had been there had been nothing but awesome, amazing relationships in their past. Like your parents had a great relationship and they were great role models, and your friends were nothing but great role models and encouraging to you. And if nobody ever mistreated you or abused you or belittled you or took advantage of you, if you had spent your whole life swimming in joy and affirmation and kindness and acceptance, if that's how you came into the relationship, and your love interest or spouse came into the relationship that way, then all you'd have to do is just put each other first and you could fall in love and stay in love. But is that how we come into our relationships? No. I don't know anybody who's lived that way, come into a relationship that way. People normally don't come into a relationship with a perfect past. Most of us come into a relationship with what we call baggage, luggage. We've been dinged up a little bit. We have been wounded. Something our parents did or didn't do is there in our past. Something our friends did or didn't do, or our peers or our siblings did or didn't do. We got stuff. And by the way, this isn't about a pity party. The point is, we all come into relationships and our heart isn't always in great shape. And if we're not aware of this, get ready for problems. To help me illustrate this, I want to introduce you to two friends of mine. This is Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. Can you see them? Yeah, can you see Mr. and Mrs. Mugg, everybody? I don't know if it'll be on the screen behind me. This is Mr. and Mrs. Mugg. They met in college. Yeah, fell madly and deeply in love, and while they were dating, like most all of us did, while they were dating, they were very, very careful about each other. Very careful. They didn't really have any real dings, any real bumps, along the way while they were dating, and it was just perfect because when you're in that dating mode, you're being very careful of their heart. He's being very careful of her heart. She's being very careful of his heart. No real bumps or dings along the road. But after about a month of marriage, all of a sudden, there's a bump. And she is like, where did that come from? And he's like, I don't know. Whatever you did to me made that stuff come out of me. I didn't know it was there. She's like, well, I didn't know it was there either. And things settle down for a little while, and then there's another bump. Like, oh no, you did it again. No, you didn't. You did it to me. I did not do that to you. And she goes off and talks to her sister about what happened. And he goes off to talk to, he's a guy. He doesn't talk to anybody, He looks in the mirror and he says, when she does this to me, it brings out something in me that I didn't know was there. And she's talking to her sister like, I had no idea that this guy was like this. Where did it all come from? My notes are covered in beads. I didn't know that was all there. It's a problem, right? And it happens again and again and again and again. We don't know why it's there. He thinks my wife has issues. She thinks my husband has issues. Whenever we argue, you make me this way. Now, here's the thing. Mr. Mugg thinks that the reason the blue beads come out of him is because of what she's doing. And Mrs. Mugg thinks the pink beads are coming out of her because of what he's doing. But here's the truth. The reason that the blue beads come out of Mr. Mugg is because that's what's in there. And the reason the pink beads come out of Mrs. Mugg is because that's what's in there. And you know where I'm going already, right? You get this. You figured this out. All of us have stuff already. All of us have stuff in us. And you don't really know what's in you until you get bumped. Whoa, where did that come from? I did not know that was there. And most of us don't really get our first gut-wrenching bump until we get in a romantic relationship that we're committed to. There's something about romance, and there's something about commitment to each other and proximity to each other that brings out the best in us and brings out the, what? Worst in us. Brings out the worst in us. I'm committed to you. Whoa, what was that? What just happened? And right there's the answer to the mystery I mentioned earlier, a little bit ago, a few minutes ago. There's the mystery. This is why people who make the ultimate commitment to each other end up madder at each other than anybody else on the planet, because he's absolutely sure that the reason the blue beads are coming out of him is because of what she's doing and saying and getting on his nerves. But the truth is the beads come out because they're in there. And she's thinking, if he would just stop, if he would just start, if he would do more of, if he would do less of, the beads would quit coming out. But the reason they come out is because that's what's in there. All of us have stuff in there. And all of us blame the person we love most for what comes out of us. So the question is, what do we do about this, right? And the answer is pretty simple. It's simple, but not easy to do. Something most of us don't do. And here's the answer. We have to learn to pay attention to what's going on inside of us. We've got to learn to pay attention to what's going on inside of us. And here's how one of the biblical writers puts this. And I say one of the biblical writers, the guy who wrote this, his name is Solomon, and he was known in the Old Testament and the New Testament as the wisest person to have ever walked the earth. That's a pretty big deal. So when Solomon writes something, when Solomon says something, we should probably really take a pretty good look at it, right? So here's how he begins this particular passage. Solomon says, above all else, guard your heart. Let's say that all together. Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Above all else, guard your heart. So when a guy like Solomon says, above all else, you kind of get the impression that he's saying, hey, of everything I've ever taught, of all the stuff that I've told you is important over the years, over the decades, this is as important or more important than anything else. Above all else, guard your heart. Now, a little side note here, just because I'm kind of a weirdo about this stuff. There are several words in Hebrew that we translate from Hebrew into English as heart. There's several words that we translate as heart. And we translate it as heart because in Western thinking, the heart is just kind of been known as the seat of our emotions, right? Our heart is the seat of our motivations. Our heart is the seat of love. Our heart is the seat of all that. But several of the Hebrew words that we translate into English as heart actually literally mean bowels. Think about this. Baby, there's my wife. So my wife over there, baby, honey, I love you with all my bowels. Just want you to know it. She says right back at me, can you believe it? She broke my bowels. You know me. I like to wear my bowels on my sleeve. Should I stop there? Is that enough? I just think that's hilarious. What Solomon is telling us, pay attention to what's going on inside. Pay attention to the seat of your emotions, that source of your emotions. In English, pay attention to your heart. Pay attention to your heart. And here's why this is so important. You're in this romantic relationship, and all of a sudden, this stuff starts spilling out. And you didn't know it was in you, and you blame the other person, right? And maybe you even bail out on the relationship. I'm done with this. I'm out of here. I'm done with this. But you get into another relationship, and the same stuff spills out over there. And so you bail out on that one. You get another relationship, and stuff still spills out there. And so after a while, you begin to think to yourself, you find yourself saying, well, I've been through 3 marriages and 5 other relationships, and the strangest thing is all those women had the same issues. They bring these blue beads out of me every time. But that's just what's in you. Solomon says this is why you need to develop a plan. You need to develop a strategy and guard your heart because you can't control that other person's behavior. And when their behavior collides with the contents of your heart, something's going to spill out and it won't be pretty. Back to Solomon's words in Proverbs. He says, above all else, guard your heart. We have that part already. For everything you do flows from it. Everything you do flows from your heart. Guard your heart because everything you do, that means everything you do in your relationships, everything you do romantically, everything you do on a day-to-day basis, he's telling us it flows from our hearts. And again, I think heart is the right word in the translation here because you don't want everything flowing from your bowels, do you? That's bad. Everything you do flows from your heart. Jesus said the same thing, by the way. Matthew chapter 15. He said, everything that comes out, everything you say, the actions that you live out, they have as their source your heart, that seat of all your emotions. So if your heart isn't in good shape, it's going to be almost impossible to maintain healthy relationships. Now, when we talk about this sort of thing, I think it's easy for us to identify this issue in other people. Way, way easier than it is to identify it in ourselves. Like you've got a friend who comes to you and tells you about their relationship with their spouse and what happened in a particular instance, and you're listening, and you don't say it out loud, but you think, oh my gosh, yeah, what she did was bad, but what you did was worse. Your response, oh my gosh, yeah, I can't believe that he did that, but girl, you did that as a reaction? That's even worse. You think those things, but you don't say those things to your friend, do you? You kind of just pat him on the back. Oh, yeah, that's bad. That's bad. It's almost impossible to see it in ourselves, but we can see it in other people. The bottom line here is that what's in you is going to come out of you regardless of who is with you. You can change out the person that you're with, but eventually what's in you is still going to come out. And if you want to stay in love, you got to learn to pay attention. You got to learn to monitor your heart. So the question then, the next one is how? How do we do that? And that's what I want us to spend some time in. There's an exercise that is pretty straightforward and pretty easy to remember. It's an exercise that we don't often do. We're not trained in this, but it can make all the difference in the world. It's an exercise that can help you learn to pay attention to what's going on. And by the way, this exercise is a part of maturing in being a follower of Jesus. It's something we should simply do because, all right, this is how Jesus wants me to interact with people, with especially that one that I want to stay in love with. So I need to learn these things. But I also want to say this. Hey, if you're not a believer, if you're here or watching online, you're like, I don't really believe all this stuff, all this can still work. All these principles can still apply without you believing in God, without you following Jesus. But I would tell you that following Jesus helps a lot because then you have a power source outside yourself to keep you going in the right direction. But believe it or not, this stuff works. So here's the exercise, and there are 2 parts, possibly 3. And it begins with this. You've heard it said before, think before you what? Speak, right? Think before you speak. Biblically, here's what that says. This is James in the New Testament writing. He says, you must be quick to listen. You must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. And here's what being slow to speak, what it does. Being slow to speak buys you time to think. Being slow to speak buys you time to think. So stop and think about what you're feeling before you speak. And the goal is to identify exactly what it is you're feeling. Now, men and women both struggle with this, but men have the reputation for not being able to name their feelings, right? I don't know, this may not apply to everybody, but sometimes men have 2 emotions, negative emotions that they can name. What are you feeling right now? I feel frustrated. Okay, what else? Anything else in there? No, they're just frustrated. There's got to be more in there. Well, maybe I'm a little angry too, frustrated and angry. Guys, we've got to expand our emotional vocabulary. Right? And some women do too. They need to expand their emotional vocabulary. So men and women, let's take a minute and do that. Because here are some other emotions that you might have that you need to name, because vagueness doesn't cut it. Vagueness doesn't work. You and your spouse have a bump. Don't know what happened. The stuff starts coming out. Conflict comes up, and all of a sudden, Mount Kilauea is about to erupt all over again. But instead, you pause, you think, and you name your emotions. I want to give you some expanded vocabulary for your emotions. Here we go. You might want to take some pictures of these on the screen. I feel angry, left out, embarrassed, unappreciated, ugly, unlovable. I feel like a failure. Whenever you compare me to him or me to her and what they're doing and where they're going on vacation, I feel like a failure. Okay. I feel old, stupid, lonely, abandoned, scared. I thought I was frustrated, but the truth is, I feel afraid. Okay. I feel out of control, betrayed, disrespected, picked on, jealous. Oh, and that one right there, that one's really hard to pick out in the mirror. I mean, it's so hard to admit, whenever we're around your family, in their home, they have so much more than we do. And it's not that I don't like them. I know that I'm critical of them, but I think I'm jealous. I think that's where that's coming from. And guarding your heart means identifying exactly what you're feeling. I feel insecure. Whew. Wow. I finally figured that out. So that's the first part. Expand your vocabulary. Name your feelings. And then here's what you do when you identify that feeling. You say it out loud to yourself with nobody else around to hear it. You say it out loud to yourself. We've talked, you've heard me say, especially over the last 6 months or so, that solitude and silence are two crucial things for us to grow in our faith. And it's in those moments of solitude where you can name some of this stuff and do it out loud and say whatever you're feeling out loud, just by yourself. You say it out loud. I feel jealous. That's what I feel. I feel like a failure. When he comes around and starts telling his stories, I feel like a failure. When you're able to say that, now you're getting somewhere. Because if you can guard your heart by pinpointing your emotions, and you have power over your emotions rather than your emotions having power over you. Because if our emotions go unspoken and unidentified and hidden, that's when they start really driving your life. Those unspoken, unidentified emotions, they drive your thoughts, they drive your words, they drive your actions, they may drive you to say things you never wish you had said. They can drive you into your cave if you're kind of an introvert, that drive you into there. But if you start unearthing them and naming them and saying them out loud, then you'll be empowered because you're guarding your heart. It's a process of guarding your heart. And as you begin naming them to yourself, you see the situation more clearly. You begin to say things like, well, when my wife talks about her brother and all he's doing, she's not doing that to make me feel bad. She just loves her brother and she's proud of him. And maybe this is a me issue, this bead that comes out. Maybe it's a me issue. And maybe I need to figure out, why does his success threaten me? And maybe actually I need to apologize to my wife. Here's what you find. Much of what you feel is stuff that you brought with you into the relationship and has nothing to do with your husband or your wife or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or a fiance. Their words or actions just brought something out of you that was already in there. And there is huge freedom when you begin to discern between what they said and what you feel. Because what they said and what you feel are two different things. So you name it. Say it out loud. And then sometimes, when it's appropriate, you tell your partner. Not always, but sometimes you tell your partner. So Mr. Mugg says to Mrs. Mugg, I found that whenever you say those things to me, when I tell you that I'm going to be late from work, I got to tell you, it makes me feel unappreciated. Remember, there are no bad feelings. They're just feelings. So when somebody you love says to you, when you do this, when you say that, it makes me feel a certain way, that's not criticism of you. That's our normal reaction. You just criticize me. No, it's not criticism of you. It's their observation of what's going on inside of them, right? And when somebody says something like that to you, you don't need to take it personally. It's just information. When you do that, when you say that, it makes me feel, that's just information. And your best response is simply saying, I'm so glad you told me. And then after you say those words, here's what you do next. Nothing. Say nothing more, right? There's going to be that thing inside of you that wants to say, well, you shouldn't feel that way. And there's a part of you that wants to say, I'm sorry you feel that way. No. You say, I'm so glad you told me, and you just zip it. Leave it there. And then watch this one. When healthy people, when they discover that something they do or say elicits negative emotions or hurt in their partner, when they discover that, healthy people stop doing that thing. They don't say, well, you just have to deal with it. They don't say, hey, you should grow up. You just need to be more mature. Healthy people quit doing that thing. So if you want to stay in love, what does Solomon teach us? Start paying attention to your heart. That's how you stay in love. So I want to challenge you. This week, start paying attention to your heart. Start asking, okay, What am I really feeling in this moment? Learn some new words to describe what it is you're feeling. Then say it out loud. Then look at what you just said out loud and look at what they did to elicit that. And then you say, you know what? I don't think this is a relationship problem. I think this is a heart problem. Lord, help me with this. Make it a prayer. Help me overcome what's going on inside of me. Solomon, again, his words, one more time. Above all else, guard your heart. Everything you do flows from it. What's in you, guarantee you, what's in you is going to come out. So to stay in love, you guard your hearts by paying attention to what's in there. So will you give it a try? I challenge you. I dare you. Triple dead dog dare you. Try it. So that you can have what you most deeply want, which is to be in love and to stay in love. Turn it into a prayer. Turn everything into a prayer. Turn your worries into a prayer. Turn this process into a prayer. Turn the emotions that you feel into a prayer. God, the God who created who I am, the God who created my emotions, I reach out to you. Give me guidance. Help me to see more clearly. Help me to name things that I'm not able to name right now. God, expand my vocabulary. Help me to speak out loud when it's appropriate and share with my partner, my spouse. Because they love you, hopefully they'll say, I'm so glad you told me. So what have we learned so far about staying in love? First week, make love a verb. Take the noun you fell into and make it a verb. Second week, the second lesson was treat the other person as more important than yourself. That's what it looks like to love the way Jesus loved. The new command, he said, I give you a new command. Love one another as I have loved you. What does that look like? We put the other person's interests ahead of our own. We're interested in what they are interested in. We're not competitors with the ones we love. We're supporters. And then guard your heart. All it takes to fall in love is a pulse. To stay in love, it requires a plan. And our loving, gracious God has said, here's a plan that'll help. Here's a plan that'll work. And for today, that's the good news. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.